You're watching Hoedown History, where we explore the rich history and legends of America's old time and bluegrass music.
This is a little song about the presidents of a long time ago, and if I can keep up, we'll tell the story. Gets pretty fast sometimes, you know. One title, White House Blues.
It's a classic, hard-driving bluegrass number that's been recorded and performed by a host of bands, from Bill Monroe to Flatt Scruggs, Sam Bush, Del McCoury, the Bluegrass Cardinals, to more recent bands like Greenskye Bluegrass and Chris Delia. And it's usually played at a full-throttle, breakneck tempo. While Monroe was the first to record the bluegrass version of this tune in 1954, it was actually copied from an earlier version. So stick around, because we'll listen to that earlier first ever commercial recording of White House Blues that inspired Monroe, and we'll explore the rough and tumble life of the man who made this recording. We'll even discuss what this song is even about. And finally, we'll listen to one of the earliest sources of where this tune may have come from. And there is a hint in the title as to which genre of music the song came from. So let's dive in. You're listening to the first ever commercial recording of White House Blues, which was made by this man, Charlie Poole. He's commonly remembered in music history as a hard-drinking, hard-living banjo player and singer. Born in North Carolina in 1892, he was one of 13 children. His full name was Charlie Cleveland Poole, and his grandfather had immigrated from Ireland to North Carolina during the Great Famine in the 1840s. Growing up in North Carolina's cotton mill region, Poole followed his father into mill work at a young age. By 12, he was already putting in 60-hour weeks, changing bobbins for just $3. Still, his gift for singing and banjo playing occasionally allowed him to escape the drudgery of the mill. Poole soon earned a reputation as one of the most distinctive and skilled banjo players of his era. His unique three-finger picking style developed after he made a bet that he could catch a baseball bare-handed. Well, he tried to make the catch, but he lost the bet and he broke the fingers on his right hand. Without proper medical care, the fingers healed crooked, leaving them permanently curled toward his palm. Poole reportedly cared less about the injury than about losing the bet. But this would have an effect on his banjo playing style that gave him a distinctive style, and would predate the sound of another banjo player that would also use three fingers a generation later. Among his better paying jobs was operating a still for a moonshiner called Homer Philpott. And with money from this work, Poole bought his first banjo and began traveling, playing at train stations, courthouses, and country stores that helped build his musical reputation. At 19, he married 17-year-old Maud Gibson. But domestic life didn't hold his attention too much, and he went wandering through Canada with hobos when their son James Clay was born, and the marriage ended not long afterward. In 1918, while roaming West Virginia, Poole met the crippled fiddler named Posey Rohrer and the guitarist Will Woodleaf. Together, they formed a band called the North Carolina Ramblers. And in 1920, Poole remarried and settled, at least temporarily, in Spray, North Carolina. And a major break came in 1925, when Poole and the Ramblers traveled to New York to audition for Columbia Records. They passed the audition and recorded, among other songs, the hit, Don't Let Your Deal Go Down Blues, which went on to sell more than 100,000 copies. Although he only earned $75 for the session, Poole was quickly established as a professional recording artist at this time. And just 1 year later, he was called back for another session, where he cut a number of tunes, including the first ever commercial recording of White House Blues. And when I first listened to this recording, I was struck by how much this song, written about a generation before the emergence of bluegrass, surprisingly had this bluegrass feel to it. Poole's banjo playing does evoke a certain Scruggs sound with its pulsating, driving rhythm, and for this reason, a lot of historians have thought Poole may have been a man ahead of his time. Well, Poole's recording sessions were a success, and these records went on to sell about 500,000 copies. But the success, however, was overshadowed by Poole's heavy drinking and reckless behavior. Later that same year, there was a police raid at a Virginia bootlegger joint where Poole was drinking, and while most of the patrons fled the scene, Poole chose to stick around and fight it out. When one of the officers tried to place him under arrest, Poole grabbed his banjo and slammed it down on the officer's head. Another policeman shoved a gun into the banjo player's ear, but Poole shoved it off just in time for it to fire off and chip away some of his teeth. And this made Poole real mad, and so he picked up the walking cane belonging to his disabled fiddler and proceeded to knock several policemen through the windows before leaping into a car and heading for the hills. Eventually, the cops found him, but he somehow was able to avoid jail time by paying a fine. Classic stuff, folks. Well, despite his unruly reputation, he married again, this time to Lou Emma, his fiddler's older sister, who was 10 years older than Poole. But in 1928, after a heated argument, Posey Rohrer left the band. It turned out that while Poole was being sent the royalty checks from Columbia Records to give to Posey, instead took the checks to quench his thirst for liquor. This event also soured his marriage to Posey's sister. Then the Great Depression dealt another blow when hillbilly record sales took a nosedive and Columbia dropped the group. But still, an opportunity appeared in 1931 when Poole was invited to Hollywood to perform in a film. The studio sent money for Poole for travel fare, but Poole never made the trip. Instead, he spent the money on a drinking binge that ultimately cost him his life. One morning in May of 1931, a couple of his buddies found him clutching the railings in front of the post office, asking him to play some music together. But Charlie replied in the third person, quote, "Old Charlie sung all night long, but this time old Charlie's gonna kick the bucket." And he stumbled back to his sister's house, and later that day, his body gave out, and he had a heart attack and died on his sister's porch. He was 39 years old. Charlie Poole remains one of early country music's most colorful figures, a musician whose wild lifestyle nearly matched his talent, yet whose recordings helped lay the groundwork for future country and bluegrass artists. After the commercial success of Poole's version of White House Blues, a number of other musicians recorded the song. Ernest Stoneman recorded it just 1 year after Poole did in 1927 for the OK label entitled The Road to Washington, and again in 1928, renaming it the Unlucky Road to Washington.
McKinley hollered, McKinley told, "Don't says McKinley, I can't find that Baldwin buffalo to Washington."
And the next year in 1929, Riley Puckett recorded his version of the song under the simpler title of McKinley. But it was Poole's version that would seem to be the biggest influence for the bluegrassers when they picked this tune up a generation later. Now, this song lends itself to bluegrass well, and the Stanley Brothers used to perform it on the radio in the late 40s. But it was Bill Monroe who recorded the first bluegrass version of White House Blues with Decca in 1954, with Rudy Lyle on banjo, Ernie Newton on bass, Charlie Klein on fiddle, and Jimmy Martin on guitar. This was actually one of the songs Jimmy played at his audition to join Monroe's band. And Monroe's version is just a masterpiece of high-energy, full-throttle classic bluegrass that is still today a much-loved and frequently performed standard. You'll notice on Bill's record the name of the composer of the tune is not credited to Poole, but instead listed as Wilbur Jones. This was a false pseudonym that Bill Monroe would sometimes use for writing credits. And I should probably not leave out the fact that while Monroe borrowed the same lyrics from Poole, he got some words messed up. He mistook the line, quote, "You shot my husband with an Ivor Johnson gun," and sings it as, quote, "You shot my husband and I've got your gun." He also missings the line, quote, "Doc said McKinley, I can't find the cause." The original line is, quote, "Doc said McKinley, I can't find the ball." The ball being here the bullet that the surgeon couldn't find. Which brings us to the actual story of the assassination of President McKinley, which, if you're not familiar with, well, here it goes. The story begins on September 5th, 1901, when President McKinley gave a speech while attending an exposition in Buffalo, New York. On the following day, he traveled to Niagara Falls, but returned to the exposition that afternoon. Even before the doors to the Temple of the Music exposition were opened at 4 p.m., a line of visitors formed to shake hands with the president. And as they filed in one by one, McKinley shook their hands. As McKinley held out his hand to shake hands with a man in a dark suit, 2 shots were heard. The president's assailant turned out to be a 28-year-old unemployed mill worker named Leon Shulgish. With his .32 Ivor Johnson pistol concealed in a handkerchief that was wrapped around his right hand, he shot the president at point-blank range. Of the 2 shots Shulgish fired, only one found its mark. Immediately after the attack, President McKinley was brought to a small hospital on the expo grounds. Instead of waiting for a specialist, the doctor on duty, whose history does not look kindly on, quickly performed an emergency surgery. Despite his best attempts, the doctor was not able to find the bullet, which had apparently lodged itself near the president's spine. After the surgery, the president was moved to the home of the director of the exposition. Over the next 2 days, the president seemed to improve to the point where he was able to eat a light meal on September 11th. However, from then on, his condition deteriorated. His temperature began to rise, and gangrene was discovered in the wound. By the evening of Friday, September 13th, President McKinley was in a coma. Just after midnight the next day, on September 14th, the president died. Within hours, Vice President Theodore Roosevelt became President of the United States. So that answers the question of what this tune is about. But the final question is, where did Poole learn this song from? And this one seems pretty clear. The origin of White House Blues can be found in the old murder ballad called "One More Rounder Gone," also known as the popular song Delia. Many music historians believe that Delia was the song Charlie Poole must have heard in his travels, and the one used to compose his own version of White House Blues. Now, One More Rounder Gone was collected by the sociologist and blues collector Howard Odum around 1907 and appeared in print as early as 1911. The song itself can be traced back to around 1900, when another murder took place, a year before McKinley's, this time in Savannah, Georgia. The story goes that Delia Green, age 14, was shot and killed by one Moses Houston, age 15, on Christmas Eve, 1900. She died Christmas Day in her bed at home. The couple had been together for several months, and Houston said something to the effect that he would or wouldn't let her do this or that, and Delia reacted with strong words to the effect that he had no control over her whatsoever. He then shot her. The title of the song is called One More Rounder Gone, and it was recorded in 1924. And it's a beautiful and stirring song. Again, here, being a blues ballad, the tempo is much slower than White House Blues, but if you listen closely, you'll hear a resemblance. And if you don't at first, you will by the end of the phrase when he sings the line, "One more rounder gone." Well, I'll leave you folks with this one. And once again, thanks for listening.
Tell me, tell